And we're back. Hopefully the last video. But nonetheless, I feel like certain elements were omitted just because of the time crunch. And I feel like had they had 10 episodes, then we would have really gotten more of a better sense of how life was like after that murder, because he would go on to get away with it, Steve, for a number of years and acquire back his rights. That napkin just ceased to exist and had no validity. I believe he had to attain it from the family, Nick's family, and they knew of their tumultuous relationship, business relationship, and they really didn't. What were they gonna do with it? You know, Nick was the talent, so they gave him back the rights, and he would go on to do successfully well. Aside from the club and the clubs in LA and New York, and the calendar that really took off, but also now he had full rights of back of the road show, and he would take it internationally, which was kind of sad to see because that was the intent that Nick wanted to do with his partner. At least that's what we're led to believe when we see that really sad ending for him when he's in his headquarters. He had enough money to have like a nice, beautiful, posh office in one of, like, I think it was either the theater district or the diamond district, but he definitely had his own office, his HQ in New York. That's where we see him get that famous call from the Donahue show, and that's which would propel more success because he went national on like Donahue. For heaven's sake, what's his name? I believe. Hold on. He would go on to do Gene Shalit, all of these like big, you know, journalists of the time to advertise for Chippendales, Sally Jesse Raphael, and was it Geraldo? I mean, and they were, come on, those talk shows were very about bringing in the ratings. So something as scandalous as men just wearing the little skimpy speedos would generate ratings. So it was, again, this whole show was like such a big throwback to the 80s and 90s. Very, very much gave us that. But I will say, how I left off my last video, it did play out like a Greek tragedy when it came to Ray and Steve for the last episode. We kind of bypassed through all of that, and we see already a successful, very, full of himself a little bit. I mean, he had been already, because remember, once he attained success, he wanted to show off that Rolex and was like even getting tailor-made suits to show off specifically the Rolex. But he was even at a new tier of success where he felt he was untouchable, and that's why, hence, we meet in Switzerland. But again, we bypassed that whole thing of like Strawberry tipping off the FBI. The FBI also kind of playing themselves for being hella racist. Just because the line of questioning that they went about him with Steve, like, again, we know that Steve was the mastermind behind that murder, but the way they went about, like, even teasing him about his name, was that really necessary? Or just, the typical racism luring its ugly head? And but we bypass all of that and we kind of like fast forward to this. That's why I feel like it could have benefited from another 2 episodes. But we see a very desperate Ray Cologne here, like, trying to get that information out, because once he was caught, like I said, he started singing like a songbird because he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in jail. So, and working as an informant, it would reduce, or he can even bypass jail entirely if he is able to deliver Steve on a silver platter, and he does. Like, I mean, the way that it's even orchestrated, how they were able to, yes, even get the kitchen where they meet in like a nice, beautiful restaurant in Switzerland to malfunction, so that way, and Steve had this like intuition. He was good in reading people. At least that's what's told to us, through the documentary, and I think they interviewed his son, that he had an instinct like a radar that would tip him off, like this is not something you might want to do. Unfortunately, he didn't get that tip off when he was doing that napkin contract with Nick, but no, anyway, but he was getting like this intuition that he should not be there. And Ray kept insisting, like, you can trust me, bro. You can trust me. Let's, the restaurant, look, that's just, a coincidence. Let's just go back to my hotel room. Convinces him. And they start talking about old times, things that he doesn't necessarily want to revisit. He gets him to trust him and talking about the business and how successful it's gotten. But somehow that he's able to corral him in the sense of divulging what happened. And he confesses in a moment of anger or just revisiting that time. He just verbally vomits what had happened and lets it be known that he was the mastermind, that he was the mastermind behind those murders and paid for the hit. He gets him to repeat it. It's like, you're the one that made me do it, right? And he got him. And unfortunately, though, we see a little bit of Stockholm Syndrome here, because as Steve is being arrested, here Ray is in complete, disarray, and he's distraught because he keeps saying, I'm sorry. So I gotta give it to Robin De Jesus, because he really did an outstanding job in really playing this, like, slippery, person that will just do anything for money and will turn on a dime on you, but still felt loyal and faithful to him, even though he was seeing his friend being arrested. And then we fast forward to him being extradited back to the United States and in his prison cell. And now he's seeing, like, things. I think he's battling with his demons, and then also seeing what he believes is Nick DeNoia standing in front of him, perhaps his own guilty conscience. But he's having a whole conversation with Nick. And we see, again, kudos to the makeup team and the costume designers for this show, because it really gave you 80s, but also how he had been affected by that impact of the gun. He got shot in the face, and I don't know if it was just one shot or if it was two, because in the show it seems like he was shot in the face and the chest. Also, I believe in the documentary we see a more clearer picture of what happened that horrible day, and then that the bullet, I think, exited his body and it landed in some entrepreneurship kind of book, and it had like a particular quote that was kind of ironic on where it landed. It just makes the whole thing even more chilling. And that's why I recommend you watching the docu-series. But nonetheless, he just kind of like confirms to Steve that in him being sentenced, the government will take everything and would leave Irene penniless. So everything he had been battling, I mean, for heaven's sake, you killed people for that success, for that money, and then they would basically be reduced to nothing, because once he is convicted and found guilty, the government ceases all that. And he just couldn't sit well with that. So knowing that there were actually two children, they only talk about his daughter in this series, mini-series, but there were two children, that his best solution was to just commit suicide. And he dies. He commits suicide in his prison cell. I think he used bed sheets and hung himself. And you see that people were kind of left like, what? Because the people that knew that he was behind that murder, they were just kind of left like that. And there's no ending chapter here. And, he kind of got away with it, because he just didn't spend the rest of his life in prison. And, the government didn't seize the money or anything that had to do with Chippendales. It would go on. But I don't know what happened, because I believe his wife then got sick. I think she had cancer, may have even died from cancer. But the rights of Chippendale would go on to other hands, and in fact Chippendales to this day is very still successful. And it would go on to influence other male burlesque shows. You know, Magic Mike, the Magic Mike movies, and in fact there's another one that's coming out with Salma Hayek soon, and and it would influence other countries, because I remember, I think I was still in college, and maybe it was like early 2000s, there was a Mexican version to the Chippendales. It was called Solo para Mujeres, and it was a traveling group, and they hit plenty of states in the United States and also internationally. And it was all Mexican actors, but they were like really buff and whatnot, and so they were innovative for that time. I mean, kudos to them. If it wasn't overshadowed by ego, I think they would have had better communication skills. They would still be alive, and they would be in the multi-billion status if they had just kind of worked through their issues, because they really were both creative innovators for what Chippendales would go on to do. They were the creators of that. It's just kind of sad, and it's a cautionary tale, but it is such a great show. I really recommend you guys watching it. It's currently streaming on Hulu. The costumes, I mean, whoever came up with the I mean, obviously they got references, but whoever was able to pair all those beautiful costumes, kudos to you. The makeup too. I am doing my best Juliette Lewis, you know, with her, you know, crimped 1980s hair, big old, you know, rhinestone kind of jewelry, and how it was cut like this. I mean, I'm doing my best. You know me. I will dress like the characters on the show, but I loved it. I loved it. I loved just being immersed in that world through the show. And the music. I mean, I knew I had heard the riff before, or like the backing of it, but I didn't know from where. And so, okay, so this is the contemporary version of it, right? That's Madonna Hung Up. That came out in like the early 2000s, mid 2000s. That song was a banger, but that whole like little, what you're hearing on loop, I love this song. But the original, I did not know, was an ABBA song. And I'm like, it's ABBA's, but sped up. It's Gimme Gimme Gimme, A Man After Midnight, which is featured in the show in like the first episode. What a banger, that one. The one I really, though, got stuck in my head was Slippery People Talking Heads. I was like, where has this song been sitting? Because I'm a big 1980s music fan, and so I was like, this song's pretty dope. So from the musicality to the costuming to the story, oh my god, it is such a poo-poo platter and of like greatness of the 1980s. So if you want to be immersed in that and be taken through a wild ride of like debauchery, sex, coke, but that was what it was. That's what the era was. I highly recommend y'all watch this. And do watch the docuseries, because it fills in what the show didn't necessarily showcase. So with that, y'all, if you like what you see, give us a like. Leave us a comment down below. Do you like the crimped hair? Do you like the 1980s vibe? Let us know in the comment section down below. Stay tuned. I'm going to be reviewing a few new shows too that I haven't gotten a chance to in the past, but I love The White Lotus Season 2, Fleischman in Trouble, and a few more shows that are coming up too on Hulu and on Disney Plus. So stay tuned for that, y'all. If you like what you see, follow us. Hit that subscription button. Let's bring up those numbers and the notification